Harry, great call on having us take this trip out to the great wide open so we can get in the mood to discuss one of the greatest attractions to grace the hallowed grounds of Disneyland.
There really is nothing like being surrounded by the vast American desert to get you in the mood for talking about the history of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. I really appreciate the commitment you've made on this trip to authenticity as well. I mean, riding the pack mules in, having our supplies stored in a covered wagon driven by an old mule train driver, you've really outdone yourself, bro.
Thanks. I figured we needed to put up or shut up, and I'll tell you what, I don't plan on shutting up.
You can say that again.
Hey, how you two city slickers holding up over here?
Oh, hey, Cookie. Hey, those beans you cooked up for supper were mighty fine.
And that fried cornbread was amazing.
If you thought that was delicious, you ain't tasted nothing till you tasted this. Here.
Cookie, what is this delicious beverage?
That right there's Trader Sam Coffee Company's Roundup Roast.
It tastes like I'm drinking
delicious campfire s'more. I told you it was tasty. Their Disney-inspired line of coffees use premium Arabica beans and are certified gluten and allergen-free. The Roundup Roast is lightly infused with the sweet flavor of the greatest treat on the American frontier, a traditional campfire s'more.
It's great because it is more of a subtle hint of s'mores instead of a s'more smack in the face with a fake tasting flavor.
Exactly. That's the way it is with all them coffees that they sell. The smooth taste of a deliciously roasted coffee infused with the fun flavors that inspire the sipper to dream of Disneyland.
Where do we get more of this coffee, Cookie?
I have more brewing up in the wagon, but I ordered me some from TraderSam'sCoffee.com, and I have you boys to thank for it.
You have us to thank for it, Cookie? How does that work?
Why, yes, thanks to your partnership with Trader Sam's, I was able to use the code BACKSIDE20 at checkout and receive 20% off my initial order with them. With the money I saved, I bought even more coffee for our journey back to the ranch.
That's great. So folks just have to visit TraderSam'sCoffee.com to order Disney-inspired coffees and then use Backside20, all one word, at checkout to get 20% off their initial order?
It's that simple.
Wow, Cookie, you have definitely helped me brew my happy place.
Funny you should mention it. That's Trader Sam's slogan, brew your happy place. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go water the mules before they get too fussy.
Thanks, Cookie.
Thanks, Cookie.
That Cookie, I'll tell you what, he's good people. He's maybe one of the last good people out there.
Couldn't agree with you more, man. He's a straight shooter, he is.
Well, now that we have our coffee and a warm fire, I think it's high time we start discussing what we came out here for. The history of the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad.
Yeah, I feel like this episode needs to start with a bang. And so, if you don't mind, Harry, I am going to grab this bag of ignition sand and throw it on the fire so it makes a big flame. And then I may even take this bullwhip that I found in Cookie's wagon and crack it. Do you mind?
No, I don't. Please do.
All right, so here we go.
So it all started with Rainbow Caverns Mine Train. It opened July 2nd, 1956, and it was the first D-ticket attraction, which meant it cost 35 cents to ride. And previous to this, there had only been A through C attractions, so the very first D-ticket attraction was a big, big deal. Because it was a D-ticket attraction because it was the most expensive addition to the park to date at $500,000 in 1956. The loading area backdrop was a little mining town called Rainbow Ridge, which was a California gold rush style town, supposedly one of Lillian Disney's favorite sets. Lillian was Walt's beloved wife.
Which I think is interesting. So does that mean that like the different sets at the parks or throughout all of Disney history, even with like film sets and stuff, I wonder?
I think that it is in history. I think she just really loved that she could walk through it and see it, and it was she just liked this nostalgia of an old railroad town.
That's cool.
Yeah. So they were little electric trains. They were kind of slow-moving electric trains that were part of the Rainbow Mountain Mining and Exploration Company. And it was open cars and slow pace. It was kind of like the Jungle Cruise, but without the roof. So you would have a conductor with a PA system giving you a tour as you went around this little track. So, and before I get too far into that, I have to tell you about Roger Broggie, who is a Disney legend and the first official Imagineer at Disney Studios. And you can't get too far talking about Walt Disney's life or Disneyland without hearing Roger Broggie's name, because Roger Broggie and Walt spent a lot of time together building trains. Walt had put Roger Broggie in charge of building trains for a miniature railroad line called the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad, which was in Walt's backyard. He built it kind of for his own pleasure, but it ended up morphing into the Disneyland Railroad. Well, it was rebuilt, but this kind of inspired having a railroad around the park. Later on, Broggie helped build the Disneyland monorail, the Matterhorn bobsleds, and the Omnimover, which is the technology that the Doom buggies are built on. So, tip of the hat to Roger Broggie next time you ride the Haunted Mansion, and
tip
also
of the hat
next
to
time
you,
you're strolling down. tip of the bowler's hat.
Tip of the tongue, top of the teeth.
I think he was the one with the bowler's hat, the ghost. But you can see Disneyland's. Honors Roger Broggie with a window on Main Street. It's above the magic shop. The store is called Can Do Machine Works, and it says Mechanical Wonders, Live Steam Engines, Magical Illusions, Cameras. Roger Broggie, Shopmaster, Advisor to the Magic Makers. It's a fitting salute to a Disney legend.
That's an impressive window. That's awesome.
It is. It's great. So there was also. So you'd be sitting on this open train, kind of taking a leisurely train ride through the wilderness, and there was an engineer in front or a brakeman in the rear. One of the two would narrate the experience for you. The track was in the shape of a figure 8, and it was just it was like the Jungle Cruise, just a slow. You drink your drink and take in the sights. It took about 7 minutes to ride it. The first part of the ride was called the Rainbow Desert. And it had sight gags like cacti shaped like the Seven Dwarves. This was, I think, Mark Davis had a hand in designing the gags. I'm going out on a limb. I'm not 100% sure, but usually when it comes to gags in this era, Mark Davis is the guy. You'd go under a balancing rock, which was always and forever about to fall on the train. What a hoot, every time. You'd also see the Rainbow Ridge pack mules, which we talk about in our Frontierland episode, and Conestoga wagons. And then the second part, this was the grand finale. It was called the Rainbow Caverns, designed by Claude Coates and another Imagineer named John Hinch. It was pitch dark inside, and the caverns were illuminated by black lights and fluorescent dyed water bubbling in puddles and fountains.
That would be so cool to see.
It sounds cool today, but in 1956, nobody had even seen blacklight or knew what it was, so it was just like mind-boggling. People loved it, and beautiful chorus lines played in syncopation with the water, and every guide would tell you that you'd see stalactites, stalagmites, and beautiful colors on every side. That's part of the script, yeah. And Coates designed the grand finale, which is called Rainbow Falls, which was all the colors of the rainbow flowing in separate troughs to make a perfectly rainbow Roy G. Biv waterfall.
What?
I know. And when they were building this waterfall, Wed Enterprises, which was the company that Disney Imagineers worked for, they consulted with a mathematician from the office of the famous or infamous Werner von Braun. And this mathematician said that Rainbow Falls would never work because splashes from the water streams would make the whole thing gray in a week. The idea was impossible. When Claude Coates raised this issue with Walt, Walt said, "It's kind of fun to do the impossible," which is one of my favorite Walt quotes and very telling about how Walt thought about things.
That's
he
awesome.
Understood engineering limits. Yeah, he understood that there were limits, but he also thought that let's try to best this. And
yeah, let's push on.
Exactly, and the beautiful multicolored Rainbow Falls would remain a staple of the Rainbow Caverns for 22 years.
Wow.
So it worked. They would occasionally have to change the water, but Disney and his Imagineers proved the mathematician was wrong. The beautiful Rainbow Caverns was a fan favorite, but there were also other waterfalls in the Rainbow Caverns. The beautiful Rainbow Falls was a fan favorite. So other waterfalls in Rainbow Caverns were the Staircase Falls, which looked like, you guessed it, a staircase, as well as Bridal Veil Falls, which outlined an hourglass bridal figure. And then afterward, you'd exit into a place called Mineral Hall, where ordinary rocks would turn crazy colors under black lights, in case you hadn't gotten enough of your black light fix in Rainbow Caverns.
Now, one thing that I think we should talk about here, because I don't think we really even address it in the Frontierland episode, which, shame on us for not doing this, but is the giant petrified tree that sits on the edge of Frontierland, in between Frontierland and New Orleans Square there. Did we even talk about that on the Frontier episode?
No, that's not in the Frontierland episode. I guess, yeah. We should talk about that, though.
Yeah, because
that's big.
Well, and it's a crazy Walt Disney story, and what I love is the fact that that is one artifact in Disney that is native to Colorado.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so this story is completely off the cuff, as are all of our stories. We never go off of a script, right?
Sure. This is all off the top of our heads.
But, so the story goes that Walt Disney and Lillian decided to take a little road trip, I believe for an anniversary trip. And Walt was into all these little knick-knack shops all across the Western Front. And Lillian was over it after even just a little bit of looking at these things. It was the same thing every single time, and she was just done with it. So Walt pulls into this place because he's got, this is all before Disneyland is really that huge. And so he's trying to get all these ideas together. And as far as I know, he's trying to collect rocks for the Mineral Hall during this trip. And he comes to this place where he sees this beautiful petrified tree, and he has to have it. And the best part is, if you look at the plaque at Disneyland, it says that it's a gift to his wife, Lillian. And a lot of people think, oh, what a charmer, how cute, how precious is this? When in reality, it's just this giant inside joke about how much Lillian Disney hated that petrified rock.
It was a gag gift.
Exactly, and he gave it to her just as a gag. Did we talk about this? I feel like this...
No, we didn't.
I don't... Man, I feel like that's such a great Disney story that shame on us for not even bringing that up. There's actually an episode, and we've referenced this podcast before, but of the DHI podcast, the Disney History Institute podcast, where he goes into this entire story about the petrified tree, and it is totally worth listening to. I, with this off-the-cuff story, completely butchered the story, but he does a great job of giving you all of the entire story.
Yeah, it was... I've heard that story too, and he bought the stump and kind of joked around, and of course Lillian thought it was funny too, and just in case you're wondering what her reaction was.
Exactly, she wasn't like bitter or nasty about it.
Sure. He was joking about buying knickknacks, and then bought this stump and joked about it, and then drove off. But then later the stump was delivered, and he's like, I actually did. So I think that's kind of the gag. I could also be butchering this, but I know what you mean. But yeah, there was so much in Frontierland that those little things, sort of like the Dominguez Palm in Adventureland. We covered that up. There are so many things. It's really hard to pick out everything in every episode. It's almost impossible. So thanks for bearing with us as we fill in that little detail. But I'm glad you got that in, Al. That's a good catch. So moving forward, in 1960. The ride became Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland. Walt Disney had a picnic to show off the new attraction to over 700 reporters, which that would be a lot of fun, I think.
And can I just say how amazing it would be to see somebody like Richard Branson hosting a picnic to unveil his next venture?
Yeah, exactly.
Times were different.
Wearing a plaid shirt, yeah. Can you imagine, like, having reporters covering a picnic in today's, like, news society?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. It's something so quaint and nostalgic about, like, we're covering the big picnic today. Grab your cameras.
And let's go over with your baskets.
Yeah. How was the corn on the cob? How was the fried chicken? Don't leave out any details. What about the salad?
Who, what, where, when, why, and how?
Yeah.
So tell us about how they extensively re-landscaped, Harry.
They extensively landscaped the terrain and added over 200 new animatronic animals. So you'd see bears in water, elk stags with their horns locked in battle, scenes from nature like that. And Walt himself was actively involved in creating the scenes, which were similar to his True Life Adventure series.
Now, again, if I could jump in here with some more background knowledge. There's a lot of people who will point to these animals on Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland as the first instance of audio animatronic technology. Now, that actually isn't 100% accurate. It's somewhat accurate. They are the precursors to audio animatronic technology, simply because of the way they move. But the first original use of audio animatronic technology as we know it was a few years later when they opened Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. So I just wanted to throw that out there because there's a lot of purists who kind of want the whole picture, and that is the whole picture, that yes, these were fun moving creatures, but they weren't audio animatronics.
They were robots, but not powered by the tape reels that made the audio that synchronized the movements. And
they were not true automatons.
They were not true audio animatronics. So you can, next time you're at a lunch and you want to clear the table, you can drop some knowledge like that.
Bring that
people. But the Rainbow Caverns part of the attraction remained essentially the same because people liked it so much. Mm-hmm. They also, and it's amazing, Rainbow Caverns people really loved that all the way till the end of the attraction, when it closed, I think in 1977. So that's a good run. That's 21 years of impressing people, just being unchanged. So they also, outside the caverns, they got you ready to go inside Rainbow Caverns by adding geysers and bubbling pots of mud in all colors. You'd also ride under a waterfall, similar to another ride after which our podcast is named. The script says, if you've never gone beneath a waterfall before, then get set, because we're coming up on Big Thunder. You don't have to worry, though, unless the wind changes. I love that.
What a wry
humor.
joke.
Yeah, wry joke. Well, if the wind changes, you'll have to take your suit to the dry cleaner, you know? It's a big deal. You'd, of course, cross a rickety bridge, because that's fun.
I feel like everything in Frontierland has to cross a rickety bridge is what we're starting to see.
It's a requirement. Rickety bridge, check. No rickety bridge, minus 10 Frontierland points. Yeah, forget it. So, like Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, it was a great attraction to see the fireworks. That's an insider tip, by the way. Mm-hmm. And if you rode it at the right time...
Especially if you're there in 1975. It's an insider tip for 1975. If you can transport back, it's a great place to see the fireworks.
Yeah, if you have a time machine and want to see fireworks, let me tell you. I meant that, like, the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad today is a good place to see fireworks, but you really hijacked that.
I was so confused by that.
But the train would actually stop on a hillside and let you watch as colored explosions lit up the Anaheim sky. I would imagine a fireworks show followed by a ride through the Rainbow Caverns would be the perfect way to cap off a day at Disneyland.
I completely agree. And I've experienced that myself, and it really does cap off a great day at Disneyland.
When you get in your time machine.
Speaking of time, as time pressed on, though, people lost interest in the Wild West, and by the late 70s, the attraction wasn't pulling the numbers it once was. So in 1977, Imagineers retired it from service. But there were some big things a-brewing for that whole area. The brewing began actually in Florida, not at Disneyland. The history for this area now shifts towards the Orlando side of life, with an area called that's not true, with an area called Thunder Mesa.
Wait, Al. Slow your roll here. There is not an area anywhere in Walt Disney World called Thunder Mesa.
Well, you are technically correct, but Thunder Mesa is quite possibly one of the most amazing, ambitious, and epic places that was never built at Walt Disney World.
Okay, I don't believe you yet, but supposing I did, tell me more.
Okay, so let's rewind our timeline a little bit and go back to the late 60s, early 70s. Walt Disney World was in the final phases of being created, but during the creation, Imagineers decided to have a Western-themed area like they had at Disneyland. This was going to be called Thunder Mesa. The Imagineering team designed 3 or 4 attractions that would be housed inside the Thunder Mesa area, with one of them being a flagship e-ticket attraction. The Thunder Mesa area was being helmed by who else other than Mark Davis, famous Imagineer and Disney legend of Pirates of the Caribbean, Jungle Cruise, and Haunted Mansion fame. Like many areas of the park, Imagineers at this time generally just ported over attractions from Disneyland that were popular and drew in huge crowds. This is why I will always think that Disneyland is significantly better than Disney World, because Disney World is just a port over of all Disneyland attractions. I digress.
Whoa.
I know, but this is a podcast about Disneyland, so I'm going to give Disneyland love. So, anyway, the big attraction at the time in Disneyland was Davis's newest creation, the Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, people couldn't get enough of them. Imagineers had a problem, though. Being in Florida, they all believed that pirates, while exotic to Californians, would be kind of novel to Floridians. I mean, after all, there were already so many pirate-themed resorts and restaurants in Florida, not to mention Florida was a historical stomping ground for actual, real-life pirates. So when it came time to build Walt Disney World, Imagineers knew the park needed an attraction to replace pirates. On top of that, Davis, like Walt, believed in not topping pigs with pigs, meaning he didn't like repeating himself. We've repeated and used that phrase over and over throughout the podcast, and if you're curious about what topping pigs with pigs is all about, it was in the early stages of the Disney studios, and Walt Disney released The Three Little Pigs, which was a major success, and he thought, okay, well...
Runaway success.
Yeah, and he was like, maybe I can do this again. And so he made a sequel to The Three Little Pigs, and it completely flopped. And because of that one incident, it changed Walt Disney's philosophy about his creativity from there until the end of his life. It's pretty amazing how just one little thing like that could change somebody's trajectory so much. But anyway, Thunder Mesa provided the perfect opportunity for Davis's fresh start instead of topping his pigs with pigs. He began spinning ideas around in his head. He took the ride concept from Pirates of the Caribbean and merged it with the Western theming of Thunder Mesa to create, in my opinion, the ultimate ride-through attraction at Walt Disney World. The new attraction would be called the Western River Expedition, a Wild West version of Pirates of the Caribbean. This sounds like possibly the most epic attraction I have ever heard of coming from the Disney company. I cannot believe how flabbergasted I was in doing research when I heard about Thunder Mesa and what it possibly could have been.
It sounds really, really fun and really immersive. And I can see where you're coming from. I mean, it makes sense to bring the Wild West to the East Coast so you can show audiences something original.
Absolutely. So here's the setup. You enter an old mine shaft and are instantly shrouded in the dark of a western night. You then board a boat that winds you through scenes of cowboy shootouts, stagecoach robberies, and Native American uprisings. All of the animatronic figures on the attraction would be the most advanced for their time, their lifelike movements adding to the majesty of the incredible Western River excursion. Eventually, the attraction would end with a giant flash flood wiping out the town of Dry Gulch, the little village the whole attraction was themed around. Everyone was thrilled about the concept for Western River Expedition, so they started going forward with it full steam ahead. But as with most river journeys, the Imagineers hit quite a few bends and unforeseen forks in the river. And this is where the story begins of what I like to call the Curse of Thunder Mesa.
Well, it's kind of funny too. That Dry Gulch gets wiped out by a giant flash flood. That sounds like a Mark Davis gag if I ever heard one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and but about the Curse of the Thunder Mesa, I'm gonna say if you're some kind of coward, we're gonna tell you to stop listening right now. That's right. Go ahead and cut it out because this is gonna. You're in for a scare. Let's go. I want to hear the Curse of Thunder Mesa.
Well, Harry, some say the curse started when Walt Disney World opened on October 1st, 1971.
That's the scariest date I can imagine.
I don't know if I can keep that whole ruse up. I'll just tell you about the curse of Big Thunder Mesa. So people love the new twist on an old classic attraction that they experienced at Walt Disney World. And the interesting thing is people were really expecting a repeat of Disneyland, which in my opinion, that's what they got, but never mind. They wanted the Jungle Cruise.
Oh, really, Al?
They wanted the Jungle Cruise, the Rivers of America, the whole 9 yards. They simply wanted all their old favorites to be in Florida. So when guests arrived to Walt Disney World and didn't find a Pirates of the Caribbean attraction, needless to say, they were very, very upset. People kept asking, "Hey, where are the pirates?" That was the best tourist impression I could give in the 1970s.
Where them
Seems
pirates?
like a valid question.
Where them pirates at?
We came all the way from Boston. Where are the pirates?
Hey, where are the pirates, huh?
I don't know. Where are the pirates, dude? They have them out in California.
I don't know how to do like a Pacific Northwest accent. I brought this brown corduroy jacket to wear in Walt Disney World. Where's the pirates?
I asked this with no ounce of irony whatsoever, but where are the pirates?
And where is my single drip Bravia, by any chance? I don't even know what that is. I don't even know if that's something.
I think we're just learning that we don't know anything about the Pacific Northwest other than Portlandia.
I'm pretty sure everybody talks like Kurt Cobain up there.
Where are the pirates?
And we're famous. Oh, man.
Well,
that just lost us a star rating on iTunes, that's for sure.
Now we're down to a half star.
Oh, so anyway, all these people kept asking exactly what we're saying is, where are the pirates? So the Walt Disney World Imagineering team, they definitely weren't expecting this reaction. It was kind of shocking to them. And unfortunately, they weren't prepared to answer those pleas of guests looking to get their pirate fix. Now, on top of people wanting pirates, things were changing along the American landscape as well. And Mark Davis's design ideas were beginning to kind of worry the company. Davis was a huge fan of caricature, exaggerating traits and features of his characters. Well, some in the company began to really worry about the depiction of certain Native American cultures and the women in his new attraction, Western River Expedition. They believed Davis's characters to be insensitive to both aforementioned groups, which caused the project to slow in order for changes to be made, so Western River Expedition could be made more, as the Disney execs saw it, culturally sensitive. Now,
okay.
yeah. I think it's a very interesting conversation, and I think it's you see this all the time, and I think that it's shrouded in a bit of controversy because, I mean, I don't want to make a parallel between this move and the Pirates of the Caribbean change that just happened, but you see that when you've got millions and millions and millions of people coming through your park, and as we record this episode, the hurricanes just passed through Orlando, and Disney closed the parks for the weekend. And I was watching a Disneyland YouTube channel, a Disney YouTube channel, and the host said that Disney lost an estimated $80 million from closing for that Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Wow.
How incredibly huge is that?
Well, and Yeah, it's those parks. The money that it costs to operate and bring them in, it's really staggering. They make more money than the studios do, but they cost significantly more too.
Oh yeah, the operations cost on these parks is insane.
Yeah, and I can, in case for listeners who might not be sure about the pirates thing that we're talking about, they took the redhead in the auction, and the one where you buy a winch for a bride and show her your larboard side. They're making it so that they're putting a pirate hat on her, and she is also looting with the pirates, and now they're auctioning things instead of people because they were upset that auctioning people was too controversial with all of the human trafficking and things like that. So people say, well, this isn't human trafficking, this is a scene from Pirates, and other people are saying, well, it's all in the world. So it's a hot topic, and I'm not sure what the right answer is, but
exactly, I don't think it's as black and white as a lot of people are trying to frame it. I think that there's a lot of complication. I think there's a lot of expectation on both sides. And unfortunately, I just don't know. I think that Disney's kind of caught in the crosshairs and doesn't know exactly how to react and respond in the situation other than to say, I mean, I would imagine, because I was just thinking as we were talking about this, in 2 years, if all things work out well and this podcast is still on iTunes at that point, will people think back on this and be like, why were they all up in arms about that? Because, I mean, during this time, too, there was a lot of uproar saying, well, Mark Davis shouldn't be silenced. He should be able to move forward with his characters, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And as time goes on, it just kind of becomes a footnote to a footnote. And I'm wondering if that's the exact same thing that's going to happen with this Pirates of the Caribbean controversy.
Maybe. Well, and there's also other reasons, too. Like, as an investor, Pirates works. Mm-hmm. So I think the Disney culture at that time was like, okay, they were very risk-averse in the time between after Walt. They said, we know what works, let's stick to the formula, let's just do Pirates again. They really weren't doing anything terribly risky during that time. And also, they didn't particularly stand out either.
And I think it's a really interesting period. And I think on Did You Know Disney, we do need to talk about the Disney company in the 70s, because it had, without a doubt, lost its charm and identity that made it once such a powerhouse in the culture. And it's really key to understand that exact thing. I think that's a great point that you bring up, that during this time, the Disney company could not afford controversy. They could not afford any sort of bad publicity, because they were really kind of running on creative fumes and thin ice. Not with the culture, but I think with the executives, because this company had been run by a creative genius, and then all of a sudden it's put in the hands of the board. And the board doesn't even know what to do other than financial decisions. So everything, instead of being made creatively, was understandably at this time made for financial decisions. Was that the best thing for the company? Maybe not, but at the same time, they kind of did the best that they could with the hand that they were dealt.
Yes.
So that was a big aside, but I think it was definitely worth talking about, especially to frame this time in the Disney company history, because that's not necessarily something that we talk about all the time, is what was going on in the culture around the company as a whole, and how does it affect all of the minute pieces of the company.
Right, and I feel like that's, while we were on a tangent, it's still relevant to Big Thunder Mountain, because Big Thunder Mountain came out of this culture. It came out in the 70s, and so it just kind of gives you a little bit of context for the environment in which this attraction was imagined. And also, I don't know if Alex covered this, but Did You Know Disney is another podcast where we talk about, where we talk about everything Disney, not just Disneyland. So if you want to broaden your scope a little bit and you need a Disney fix, we'd love for you to listen to that podcast too. Okay, so
Absolutely.
Tell us more about Big Thunder Mesa, Al.
I think this is really good to frame this entire conversation around the fact that the funds were being taken from Western River Expedition and funneled more towards Pirates of the Caribbean because of this conversation that we just had. That Western River Expedition was causing all of these issues. Pirates of the Caribbean was a sure thing. And so by 1973, Imagineers had focused most of their attention on the unveiling of Pirates, which caused Western River Expedition to fall even further by the wayside, unfortunately. Executives at Disney claimed that Thunder Mesa in general was way too expensive to build as it was. And they tasked a young, burgeoning Imagineer to fix this Thunder Mesa project.
Who is this young, burgeoning Imagineer?
I'm glad you asked, Harry. This Imagineer's name was Tony Baxter.
Never heard of him.
I know. Moving on.
Next.
Great day for a baseball game.
Yeah.
So anyway, Tony Baxter was born on February 1st of 1947. He grew up in Southern California watching Disneyland literally grow up with him.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. He was fascinated by theme parks, Disneyland in particular, and in high school took the opportunity to tour the Imagineering facilities. After that trip, he was hooked for life. He originally took a job at the Carnation Plaza Gardens. Now, this is kind of a cool little tidbit that Carnation Plaza Gardens was owned by one of the lessees in Disneyland. If you want to know more about the lessees of Disneyland, check out our New Orleans Square episode because it's some sort of bizarre alter ego history of the Disneyland parks.
It's a little bit of a mess, and you can see, too, when Disneyland opened, they were still working things out, and the lessee situation was one of those things that they worked literally out of the park.
And Walt never really wanted them in the first place, and so I think that he was super stoked to have them out. But if it wasn't, and that's the interesting thing, if it wasn't for these lessees, we wouldn't have Tony Baxter in the park. And the reason why I say that is because Tony Baxter took a job with Carnation Plaza Gardens, of all things, because he was able to get hired at 17. That's the earliest age a lessee could hire someone to work at the park. So without the lessees, who knows? Tony Baxter may not have been able to get that job. Circumstances may have changed, and he may have moved on to something else. So because of this thing that Walt Disney didn't love at his park, he was able to get somebody that, even when Walt was alive, didn't know the significance of this Imagineer.
Yeah.
So he started his Disney career off as an ice cream scooper and a popcorn seller, which, how inspiring is this? That the dude starts out as an ice cream scooper and popcorn seller and becomes one of the most famous Imagineers in Disney history. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, me too.
And this is really cool because during his lunch breaks, he would explore the Wonderland of backstage Disneyland. And I have to tangent and say that that was one of my favorite things to do when I worked there. I used to get to the park sometimes 2 hours before my shift would begin, and I would just wander all through the backstage area, just seeing what everything had to offer. It was a Disney fan's dream come true.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Because
what was the best thing about it?
Well, I think that, like, what was the best thing that I ever saw, or what was the best thing about exploring?
Yeah, like what did you get out of it when you explored and you had a great day exploring? What was a great day?
I think for me, a great day of exploring backstage Disneyland was seeing a place that I'd never seen before, or knowing that this was a place that Walt Disney had once walked and been able to envision myself walking alongside him, as cheesy as that may be.
No.
Just seeing him planning everything out. And I mean, when you go backstage, it's pretty amazing to see all of the little cubbies, all of the show buildings, all of the stables. Everything back there is just so overwhelming. And I know this may sound odd, but I was one of the only people ever walking around just looking around. There were never any cast members who left their area. They would go directly to their attraction, right back to their car. Nobody ever took the time to stop and look at Walt's creation. And so that was something that was really cool for me personally.
Yeah, very neat.
So anyway, sorry. Baxter did the exact same thing, but probably on a way cooler level. And one of these exploits, he was nosing around the shell of what was soon to become Pirates of the Caribbean. And he somehow pulled off catching the eye of Imagineer Claude Coates, who came over and kind of said, "Hey, what are you doing around here?" And apparently go ahead.
This is an unbelievable story.
I know. This is incredible. So Baxter and Coates spoke for a while, and Coates ended up taking Tony Baxter on a tour of the unfinished Pirates ride. Needless to say, after an experience like that, the fires were stoked even higher by this encounter. I just wonder if he got the infamous rolling chair through the Pirates ride experience.
I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to ask him when we have him on the podcast.
Which we're going to have him on next week, just so you know.
Yep.
Just kidding. A lot of people are like, what? You're going to have Tony Baxter on? Yeah.
Yeah.
If that makes you listen next time.
I didn't even bother to say just kidding. It's like, we'll also have Elvis, Michael Jackson, and Augustus Caesar, or Caesar Augustus. One of those two.
One of them,
and
whoever's going to cause a census to happen. It doesn't make any senses.
Hi-oh.
All right, so moving back to Tony Baxter, he ended up studying landscape architecture of all things at Cal Poly Pomona before transferring over to Cal State Long Beach to study theater design, which both of those things don't necessarily seem to connect well, but when you figure out that Tony Baxter was a genius at what he did, it makes complete sense that he would build all of his foundation of knowledge on where the foundation of his attractions would begin, which was through landscape design landscape architecture, and the theater design side only makes sense with Imagineering.
It's really perfect for what he did.
Oh, absolutely. This is cool. He spent his senior year of college developing a portfolio of Disney attraction designs, no doubt in hopes of securing a position as an Imagineer. Baxter's continued love of Disney and theme park design finally caught the eye of Disney Imagineering, and eventually he got a job with Imagineering in 1970 at the age of 23.
He had his stuff together by 23.
Oh, he knew exactly what he wanted, man.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Envious, huh?
No, not even a little bit.
Yeah. I know exactly what I want to do. I want to go sell beef jerky to people in a small town in Nebraska.
Really? I want to just give people endless breadsticks. Which is what I did at 23. Jealous much?
When I was 23, I was steeped right in the middle of the Joe's Crab Shack era of my life.
That is truly an era.
So, moving back to Baxter, he was quickly shipped off to Florida to work on this hulking behemoth of Walt Disney World. Remember, he got hired on in 1970. The park opened in 71, so it was like all hands on deck. While he was there, he worked as a field art director on the Florida version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But another job he was tasked with trying to salvage was this Thunder Mesa debacle that had been plaguing the Walt Disney World frontier.
That is crazy that they're like, let's ask the new guy to do it.
Well, I think that's why, honestly, I think that shows exactly how doomed they thought this project was. And if you think about it, how depressing of a time does this have to be for Mark Davis?
Yeah, seriously. Poor guy.
I mean, here the dude is coming off of a high like no one's business from the success of Pirates of the Caribbean. Here he's got the direct attention of the owner of the company, Walt Disney, who basically signs off on everything that Davis does. Yeah. And now Disney's gone, and everybody's like, oh, Mark Davis, yeah, he's just kind of an old bag of bones. Nobody really wants to do anything that he does because, honestly, it's offensive and strange now.
Yeah, that sounds sad. That sounds like an independent film.
Oh, it totally does, starring an old Adam Sandler.
Oh, yeah.
For some reason, I just feel like he plays old sad sack so well.
It's just his face is very lived in. Or maybe Jim Carrey.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. Or John Lovitz. So anyway, Baxter loved the designs of Thunder Mesa, which made at least one person in Imagineering who loved the Thunder Mesa design. But he knew that he couldn't allow it to exist in its current state. So he started to examine all of the different models for this eventually doomed area. But his eye kept going back to a little runaway mine train roller coaster that ran through the area. He couldn't help but think about how much fun that would be to ride. So Baxter went to work creating a new idea. He would be joined in this venture by, how awesome is this and serendipitous, by none other than Claude Coates, the man who took him on the
Wow.
tour of Pirates of the Caribbean so many years before. I think that is an awesome story.
Well, it just everything worked. Everything was coming up Baxter.
Oh,
Like,
without
he-
a doubt.
He met Claude Coates backstage. He was hired on as a lessee at 17. All these, and then got hired on right out of college because he just he had his life together enough to put together a portfolio of attractions that obviously was amazing enough to attract the eyes of Imagineers. I mean, wow, Baxter was on a hot streak.
Well, and here's one thing that I'll say also. I know this is, again, a complete tangent, but truthfully, until you work at Disneyland, you don't realize what a small community feel Disneyland has. And that's one of the things that's so cool about working there. The first person that I ever met in the hallways at Disneyland, and I just told this story the other day, was a bigger, jolly fellow, and he was the VP of lighting for the entire park.
Wow.
And yeah, I was like, oh, wow, that's a pretty fascinating job. And he said, yeah, I actually started out as a Santa Claus in the Christmas parade here at Disneyland.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he went on to tell me that he ended up marrying Cinderella in that parade. He met his wife, i.e., and ever since then, they've been working in the company, and he worked his way up to the vice president of all of the lighting operations in all of the parks in California.
That's an amazing story.
So what I don't think a lot of people realize is you're part of a cast of 27,000 people at Disneyland, yet at the same time, it's very possible to stand out and to shine in ways that you never thought possible. And they hire the absolute right management teams at Disney to recognize when somebody has potential, and they will, without a doubt, groom you for better positions in the park or wherever you want to go. It's a very family company in that way, that Disneyland will take care of its own when it comes to success. And so that's why it doesn't, for me, really surprise me that Baxter, with it, as you say, everything was coming up Baxter.
Yeah. Well, and it's good to know too that that Disneyland's treating its employees well. That's important.
Oh, absolutely. Disney, kudos to you. So anyway, Baxter and Claude Coates went to work creating this rich backstory for a runaway mine train roller coaster and designed a high thrills path that this coaster would take beside the Thunder Mesa area. And believe it or not, the Disney execs loved it and greenlit the project to begin development immediately.
That's amazing.
I know. Again, coming up Baxter, this dude started off hitting grand slams and ended his career hitting grand slams.
Yeah.
Now, the development for this would actually be a pretty momentous occasion for both Disneyland and Walt Disney World, as it was the first attraction to be built simultaneously for both parks. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's a milestone.
Oh, without a doubt. It was definitely a historical venture because this would be the first attraction that was designed for Disneyland that did not have any involvement from Walt Disney.
Wow.
It was, without a doubt, the beginning of a new era and the end of an old one.
Wow. That's really important to see that torch passed on because, if they just stayed stagnant, then they wouldn't have been able to keep the park open. And Walt knew that too when he was building it. Disneyland needs to be changing all the time to stay current with society and times and what people want. But at the same time, it's tough to see change because, like Al was saying, especially in Disneyland, it's like a museum.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much history in there that it's when they change out a scene in Pirates of the Caribbean, you kind of get your feathers ruffled a little bit because your grandparents watched that scene when they were kids.
Exactly. It's like replacing the coat of armor in a museum with some sort of hilarious 1970s frock.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think that this is a great era in Disney history because there was a huge shift in the dynamic, in the emotion, in the energy, in everything surrounding the Disney parks once Tony Baxter took the helm. But
Yeah.
honestly, man, I'm kind of bushed.
I don't see why. We've only been talking for 3 hours.
Well, I think it was, personally, I feel like it was more of the pack mule train on the way up here. For some reason, my saddle wasn't situated right or something, and I definitely...
It had a P under it, a small P.
That's exactly what it was. For some reason, I've got like this crazy pain in my left side, and so...
That's sciatica. That gets all the trailblazers.
It is true. That's actually what killed Wyatt Earp. I personally want to be rested for our ride tomorrow, and if we keep yammering on like this, I'm definitely going to be too bush to bushwhack tomorrow, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, we'll pick up the story again tomorrow night. And folks, while we turn down for the night, feel free to subscribe to our show on your podcast player of choice, or shoot us a review on Apple Podcasts.
And speaking of podcast players of your choice, I thought I'd let everybody know that we are finally on Stitcher Radio. Woohoo! So if I don't know how you're listening to this, but if you want to listen to it on Stitcher instead, you can listen to it on Stitcher. You can also search for us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook by simply searching the Backside of Water podcast.
We love to hear your reviews and to hear from you, so send us a comment on one of our photos or reply to one of our tweets, and it makes our day. Anyway, Al, I think I'm going to turn in. Good night, bud.
Night, pal.
Good night, boys.
Good night, Cookie.
Good night, Cookie. Good night,
Good night, folks.